just paying $1,000, you know.
Because here's, down here asking for an extension. So, of course,
We'll call the meeting to order, and we will take a moment for silent prayer and reflection. Terry, if you call the roll, please.
Pat Burney.
here.
Kathy Cox. Here. Nicole Cohen. Here. John Maston.
Here. Please stand and join me in the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will entertain a motion to review and accept the agenda.
I make a motion to review and accept today's agenda.
Second.
Pat Burney.
Yes.
Kathy Cox.
Yes.
Nicole Cohen.
Yes.
John Maston.
Yes. And with that, we will turn it over to Superintendent Sire.
Thank you, Mr. Mazza and members of the board. Looking at the agenda for next week's meeting, we start with the consent calendar. And 4.1.1 are the minutes of our regular session from July 9th, our special session from July 17th, and our work session of July 25th. Do you have any questions on the minutes?
Can I ask a question on the personnel report?
Yes.
All right. You know, on there, those people, there were 4 of them that decided not to accept the position. They hadn't already signed a contract. They were offered a contract and then decided not to come, right?
As far as I understand, that is
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, real good. I just thank you.
They made a verbal commitment.
Yeah.
4.1.2, of course, is the approval of the agenda. 4.1.3 is the personnel report for this next week. Do you have any questions on that report? And 4.1.5 is the request for an overnight field trip out of state. Lake Havasu High School CTE Marketing and Digital Communications is requesting approval to attend the Leadership Conference at Disney on September 20th through 22nd. And that would be pending the availability of transportation. The students have been fundraising for this trip, and they would miss 1 day of school. Any questions? Moving on to new business, section 6.1 is the approval of pay for performance plan for 2018-19. This was sent to the board electronically for review in its entirety. We do have several criteria that we have to meet in order to pay out our 301 monies, and we do have an LHUSD committee. It is noted on the agenda here on the, on the cover page, who each of the representatives will be to that committee for 2018-19.
Was there a direct vote by staff on this item, or is this done solely by committee?
Each staff's plan is approved by the site staff with a vote. Any other questions? Item 6.2 is the approval to purchase 3 school buses. And I know that there may be some questions on this one, which I would defer to Mr. Murray. These are buses that were identified in our bond, and they will be using bond funds, an 84-passenger route bus, a 46-passenger activity bus, and a 38-passenger special needs bus.
I kind of found it curious that the special needs bus was the least expensive of all of them. Mr. Murray, why is the special needs bus the least expensive?
You know, it's, for one, it's a 38 passenger, but I would actually maybe have Bobby, our personnel or transportation supervisor, ask that as he's putting these quotes together.
Ultimately, it's just because it's a smaller vehicle.
Okay.
I mean, other than that, there's actually a whole lot more electronics involved, obviously, because of wheelchair lift, seating capacity, so on and so forth, but it's a smaller vehicle. That's basically all that comes down to. Less material.
There's not as many seats inside the bus.
And just because it's August, Mr. Kearns, these are all equipped with the biggest, best, meanest air conditioner that the district can put on them.
Most definitely. In fact, actually, I've been in communication with TransArctic already this year from the 3 buses that we purchased last year. The units are working beyond efficiently. We've already been praised by the different trips that we've taken and the groups of kids that I'm taking to the schools already with the new buses that we have. And I've matched per quote the same exact units on these 3 as well.
Okay, because obviously August, it gets hot in the bus.
A little.
Not a lot you can necessarily do about it. But we do put the biggest, best air conditioner that you could possibly buy on. I just want to make sure that everybody here is aware of that.
It's also known as the Havasu Special, if I remember right.
For the most part, yeah. There's a lot of people starting to make that purchase themselves because they see how well it does work, especially with the intense heat. So.
Correct.
You had a question about replacement versus additional? If there were replacement buses or additional buses?
Yes, are these replacement buses?
The special needs bus will be a replacement for sure. The route and activity will be, obviously an additional. With the expansion of high school transportation so far this year, it's actually been a little overwhelming, and I'm down to basically 1 spare bus. So until I kind of get that leveled out through this year, I mean, it's a learning curve with something new, just like anything else. I don't plan on replacing any right away. I would say probably by next year, yes, but I want to make sure that I always have a backup. There's always got to be a plan B. Something can happen, will happen, and just having that spare bus so I can make sure school happens.
How many special needs buses are in our fleet right now?
We have 8 that run each day.
Did we expand the route this year?
We did to high school. Yeah.
Where did we expand?
To the entire city.
The whole city?
Everything from a 1.5 mile radius of the school and beyond. So right now I have 3 full-time routes covering that area, and I have 3 Thunderbolt routes kind of shadowing and overlapping some of it.
Do we have any idea how many we have riding now?
Oh, I'm actually going to do a count this week because I have about 50 people waiting for a seat.
That was just a big part when
So
we were...
the ones that aren't riding are going to be removed so I can start filling the seats of the ones that are patiently waiting.
Okay.
And that was your idea. Maybe discussion at the bond time was, would we be able to provide high school transportation with the additional buses?
With the route buses that we presently have, once we complete this purchase, I'm seeing comments on Facebook from parents about how hot the buses were the first day of school. How many of those buses that have less than optimum air conditioning will we still have?
There's still going to be a few running. Like I say, we're trying to stay on top of that the best that we can. The few parts and pieces that I can get for them to update them as much as they can be updated for what's there equipment-wise, it has been done and purchased. We did actually have an air conditioning go down. It was like the 3rd or 4th day of school, but that afternoon that driver took another bus out that had air conditioning.
Okay.
Whether the parent wanted to believe that or not, but like, my protocol is the bus don't leave the yard without AC.
Well, it's interesting to read some of the comments because some parents write, oh, come on, get used to it. I used to ride the bus to high school up to Kingman and it would break down in weather like this, Let's grow up, people, so you do see those comments interspersed, but
We've actually,
it's tough.
It's been pretty good this year. We've actually gotten a whole lot more positive feedback from our public and our parents. I mean, they do know we're trying, and we're doing our best, and that we're trying to put our best step forward to provide that good transportation piece.
I think Mrs. Cox, after riding the bus last year, after we had the same issues crop up, what I found is the bus cools adequately on the way to Thunderbolt. Once you get it to Thunderbolt and you start loading kids, you've got to turn the bus off because you're in a line of buses, and the exhaust on the bus is on the right-hand side, the same side as the door. So you're turning off the air conditioning because you're turning off the bus and you're opening the door. And it warms the bus up, and then you put the students on, and you're literally filling the bus, closing the door, turning the bus on, and you're back now trying to cool the bus back down. Now it's full. So it's a much different problem than does the air conditioning work. It's can you, in that environment, in that situation, get the air conditioner to work efficiently.
The other piece that I've put in play with that, with the temperatures being 100 degrees or higher, is each driver's going out about 15 to 20 minutes before we leave to go back to the school sites, Thunderbolt and high school, and start the bus running on high idle with the air conditioning going to just try to make some small attempt to cool cabin air down. When we get to the school, we stay running on high idle until the students come out, which again is an Arizona state law. Once I have students around the buses, I have to shut them down. So we've eliminated, we've limited the time of key off at the school site quite a bit. It is helping, but still, like you say, you pack 70 warm bodies into a bus, it's going to warm back up pretty fast. But it has helped.
Thank you. Item 6.3, this is an opportunity for the board to discuss the Arizona School Boards Association political agenda and whether you would like to have someone attend as a delegate for the delegate assembly, which occurs at the same time as the NAL conference.
Did we ever get a response from our suggestion of 5 that we sent in?
I have not seen anything. I don't know if they're reflected in this draft agenda.
There are bits and pieces of them in the draft.
Vague pieces.
Huh?
Very vague.
Yeah, exactly. There are some things in here that I think go to both sides of the aisle politically. The rationales aren't necessarily always laid out.
So are we going to vote on a delegate and then vote on each one of these items so that the delegate votes the board's will, or how are we going to do that?
I think that's actually up to the board, is do you want to have a delegate represent the board, and then if so, what would you have them do?
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one in here right away that says to increase compulsory attendance from 16 to 18 years.
Yeah, I saw that.
I don't know if I would agree with that one.
No.
The objective is good, but in real life, it doesn't work.
Right.
It doesn't work out because
Right.
the kids who want to drop out of school, they really want to. They don't want to be there, and then when you keep them there against their will, just the fact that you're keeping them there against their will even makes it worse.
You're creating a disruption.
Yes.
There was another one in here, it was on the JTEDs, over on page 6, that allow JTEDs to serve students through age 21 regardless of their graduation status. I just have sort of an issue with that. When does it all come to an end? When does our responsibility come to an end? Because on the JTED, which is primarily vocational, we have other opportunities, and that's one of the areas that they can go to is the community college, where they can go to technical schools and things like that. So I'm not really in favor of that. I mean, how long do you prolong their stay in the high school?
Well, and there's a wide difference between a 17 or 18-year-old graduating point of high school and when you get somebody in that mix who's in their 20s. There's just a big difference in maturity level, and it's kind of void of grown men type of a thought process, and how well does that integrate into a group in a JTEC classroom.
And then there was a third area that got my attention, that was regarding repeal any program that gives public funds for private schools and vouchers. And I mean, I guess we're in the business of public school education. We think it's the best. And all of a sudden, I believe that's going to be on the ballot, right? The idea of vouchers. So I think that's another one we ought to look at.
Well, now are you backing ASB on this that
Yeah.
you, okay, so, okay. I just wanted to make sure, because the other two you were against, this
No.
you're for.
Yeah, I'm for that. Yeah, okay.
Do we have a sense of how we'll act next week, or do you want to sit for a week on that and come up with it at the board meeting?
First of all, is there any one of the four of us who would like to,
Well, this happens the day after the law conference ends.
so somebody would stay?
Somebody would say.
Would you be willing to do that, John?
I would if we decide to do it. I would be happy to stay and cast however we decide.
Item 6.4, this is the first presentation of several revised policies. Again, most of these are technical changes, so I will spend a little time going through them this evening. On page 1 is the budget format. This is a new policy, and this is as a result of the recent changes in the budget. Identifies 6 areas that are now required, which is the prominent posting on the website of our pupil-teacher ratios and pupil-staff ratios for special education, full-time equivalent certified employees, average salary of all teachers the previous year, display of the dollar increase in the average salary this year, and the percentage increase in the average salary. So this was part of our budget as well. Now we have a policy that aligns with the budget requirement. On page 2, policy DIE for audits and financial monitoring. This requires that we prominently post on our website homepage a copy of the profile pages that displays the percentage of every dollar spent in the classroom, and the most recent status report recent status report issued by the Auditor General. Typically, those are a year behind. On page 3, DJ is purchasing, and this is a large amount of additional language on the purchasing ethics policy. Provides some definitions of the gift or benefit and what the specific restrictions on employees are. On page 4 through 6, this is policy DJE on bidding and purchasing. There is a change on page 4, and that should read purchases of less than $25,000, as that limit was changed. That is up to the board whether they want that change or not. And then on page 6, there's additional language regarding public inspection and the rationale for awarding of the contract.
What was that purchasing of less than, what was the amount?
That's right on page 4 where it says purchases not requiring
page 4.
bidding.
Not page 4, but page.
I'm sorry, page 4 in the center. Yeah. It's just easier to do them in that sequence. That's okay.
Purchases of less, okay, I saw that before.
Starting on page 8, FEA is educational specifications for construction. There's some language added about the governing board's authority to delegate to the superintendent certain abilities. Then on page 9 is the staff conflict of interest policy, and again that identifies a little bit more detail what the definition of participating in any manner actually means. And then they also clarify gifts to now read a gift or a benefit. And then finally on the last page of that policy, page 10, there is language about training and acknowledgement of understanding the conflict of interest. Page 11 is our actual disclosure statement for conflict of interest, and you'll notice that there is some updated language in 1, 2, and 3. Starting on page 13 is IHBA, which is our special instructional programs for and accommodations for disabled students. And here the language has been changed according to statute and replaced with identification, evaluation, or educational placement of. So you'll see that language change throughout that policy. Page 16 is the admission and exchange and foreign students. It is a different wording of the paragraph that is lined out. Content remains the same. On the student wellness policy, starting on page 17, this has been modified to add the recent legislation in recess language. And so we have added the language on recess, 2 recess periods, and the timeline for that. If you'll notice on page 18, number 5 is highlighted. That is language that was not in the ASBA policy, but it is the definition of recess that is in the law. And so we felt that the policy should reflect the definition because we would get asked that. So that has been added as well. Again, on the student wellness policy beginning on page 20, there's additional language on page 22 referring back to that JL policy. And then finally, our regulation starting on page 23, again, defines how recess is required, and we've added again the definition of recess. So it replaces that language about physical activity.
How many recesses do we have at our elementary schools now?
I believe they have 2 a day already. So we have a recess and then we have a recess attached to lunch.
So we're already.
How long is recess? Anyone know?
Varies between 15 to 20 minutes.
Oh, 15 to 20 minutes? Okay.
We have a morning one at 15, and then our lunch one is 15 or 20, depending on the grade level.
Okay. When you say your lunch one, is it, you have it right at?
They have, yeah. They
It's
go
not
to,
included in the lunch?
they go to lunch for 20 minutes.
And then they go, okay, thank you.
The other area in that, Mr. Rooney, to address your question, participation in physical education may count as one recess, but at this point in time, that is additional.
Okay. And we're putting in that as a special this year?
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, beginning with item 6.5, this is our policy AD-E, our district philosophy doctrines definitions. We actually worked on this policy back in the spring and finally have gotten it together to bring back to you. And so if you look on the page that starts with the exhibit, just for the purposes of this meeting, what came out of our curriculum committee was a desire to define what does it actually mean, these terms within our mission statement. And so what we've done is color code. So if you'll notice that the scholarship is in, sort of looks red or pink, and then you'll see scholarship definition. Then the next word is character in purple, you would go to character definition. So these are the actual definitions that the board agreed upon at that meeting. And the idea would be that when you are on our website and see our mission statement, each of these words would be hot linked so that if you click on scholarship, that definition would come up. Or if you clicked on responsible citizens, the definition for responsible citizens would come up. So the only area that the board did not delineate at the meeting, which would be important to review, is under character for K through 6. And I went back and watched the video again because I wanted to make sure that this was accurate. It said a list of character traits to be determined. And so this was a list that I put together, and if the board would review that, see if it's adequate, if there's any additions or strikes from that list.
Under,
Under the
Under
K6.
K6.
The list that's underneath there.
so I'm looking at 7 through 12.
Those were ones that you already discussed at that meeting? So that was the language that was agreed upon?
At that meeting.
Uh-huh.
I wonder, I don't know the word care. I mean, I could see self-control, or if you wanted to go in another direction, I could see kindness. But care in your daily conduct is,
Taking care of
I mean,
yourself.
I get it, but it's kind of, but anyway.
That's why it's coming back to you for discussion at the board meeting.
Okay.
And for final approval, because that, while we had that meeting and we had a lot of discussion, we didn't ever bring it back for actual adoption. And so before we do anything else with it, it needs
Well,
to.
now, is it appropriate to discuss some of this tonight?
I think if you have questions about it tonight, but to have discussion about the meat of it, I think should be better done in the public meeting where it's.
Well, let me just give you some questions. We don't have to discuss them.
Okay.
One question is, I thought that this was a mission statement, and this it uses the word doctrines. To me, a doctrine is a pretty heavy word. A religion or a church has a doctrine. This is a public school system. To say that this is, I just think there's a conflict. The word doctrine, in my view, is too strong. Espousing what everyone, it's almost what you must believe if you're going to be a member of this church. This is what you believe. And I have a problem with that word. Whatever happened to the mission statement word, this mission statement? How did that disappear?
It's right there and
It is.
right there.
What do you mean? It is, it's the same. This was,
What? I don't see it.
yeah, I don't remember why we had philosophy and doctrines up there, but I remember as part of the curriculum committee, we did talk about that because this this mission expresses our philosophy, which is why we wanted to have the words defined. Frankly, I don't remember, Mrs. Cox, why we have doctrine in there. It can be removed very easily.
I must not have been at that board meeting, because I just don't.
You were there, I watched it. We were all there.
I probably was. So.
Well, you could probably, omit doctrine in there and just have the district philosophy definitions, because really that's what you're talking about. These are just definitions. And I think that might.
The definition of doctrine, just to clarify our discussion, the first is in the archaic, which is teaching or instruction. The second definition is something that is taught.
Well, it has different.
Depends on which
definitions.
dictionary you're looking at, but
different.
Merriam-Webster.
Well, fine, but it still has different definitions.
I'm reading you the top two.
Okay, but I bet there's a third and a fourth in it. I mean, you're right, but the connotation is really heavy and strong. Maybe it's my age, I don't know. Maybe your generation, people took things like this lightly. And mine, a doctrine, the Monroe Doctrine, the
I think
Catholic
it's more
Church
contextual
doctrine.
than
Well,
But it also may be redundant to have philosophy and doctrine. I think just philosophy is probably.
now, something else under rights. I see in quotes, the very last right is the right to quote, life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness, unquote. Well, the word property, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness come from the Declaration of Independence, but property is not in there. And actually, and I don't want to get technical, I don't want to bog things down, but all of these are rights guaranteed to us in the Constitution, but there is no right to property spelled out in the Constitution. There is a right to not be deprived of your property except by due process, but we don't have a right to property.
We don't have a right to privacy either.
Well, okay, so I mean, there we go.
But wasn't the original intent of pursuit of happiness relation directly to property?
For prosperity, but there's a lot of discussion about that, not property necessarily as such. But when Jefferson did his first draft of the Declaration, he actually wrote property in, and there's talking of John Locke had put that in. I've read since that John White hadn't, but neither here nor there. And Jefferson took it out on purpose, and I've read it was because the northern colonies, or at that time during the Declaration, property that would be your slavery, and they would never have gone along with the Declaration of Independence if it had property in there, because then people would be entitled to keep their slaves, and there was already a movement to get rid of slavery. And so I have no objection to people having property. I think property is a good thing, but I'm just saying it's in quotes there, and that seems to be as if it's taken from some document, and it's not. So if you want to say the right not to be deprived of your property without due process, that's a right. That's in the Fifth Amendment, but
We can take the quotation marks out and make it good.
I don't know, that those are precious words, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for a property.
Well, you don't have any liberty and you don't have any freedom if you don't have any right to property. That's the
Right.
whole purpose of having it there.
Well,
Without that right,
Well, I'm a strict constructionist of the Constitution. It doesn't say that, so I have a problem.
And under that latter part of that, pursuit of happiness, that would include that, regardless of where you went, if it was to become an owner, have ownership, that would be part of that. But, and I think that's how it was in there, that pursuit of happiness is a large area, that you can make individual decisions. If you can be an owner or whatever, that would fall under that part of the quote, I think.
Well, if you want to put right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which includes property.
well, I don't know about that.
I wouldn't even put it in there. I mean, I think that's understood
Pursuit of
in our
happiness
country.
is property.
I mean, you don't have a
Prosperity,
right,
property.
you don't have a right to property. You do not have a right to property. You have to have the means, the financial means to acquire property. But you don't have any right to property. That's why a lot of people rent, because they can't afford a house.
There are a lot of people who have no property, live with the benevolence of relatives or friends who provide their shelter and their food, but they don't have a right. They might get a bicycle from a used bicycle, but if it's not registered, if it gets stolen, they can't prove that it was their property. I mean, they don't have a right. We don't have that right to property. It's just not a right.
So if I acquire property, then the government has the ability to take it?
No.
Isn't that part of the pursuit of my happiness?
The government cannot take your property without just compensation, but that's different from, not the government, cannot deprive you of your property without due process. That means I can sue you because...
Where is that in our founding documents?
It's in the Fifth Amendment. In the Fifth Amendment. Let's see.
So I've got the constitutional right to keep my property, and I've got something defining the pursuit of happiness, but we aren't going to tell people that if they've acquired something and they've done everything right and they have absolute ownership of it, that they can keep it.
I think you can keep it, but I also have the right to sue you, and then that will be adjudicated under the due process. And there is, out of the Constitution, has evolved contract law, and that protects you. In this day and time, property is absolutely, everyone appreciates it, just not in the Constitution. That's the only, we put it here under rights, and when people say rights, most of us think the rights afforded us in the Constitution, not something else.
If you look at it historically, though, one of the reasons why the pursuit of happiness is tied to property is what the British did. The British would come to take your property without due process, without those claims. And so one of the foundational purposes of the pursuit of happiness was to ensure that your property would not be taken from you without And so there is a right to property once you've acquired it. You do have a right to maintain your ownership over things.
So that was all thrown into that phrase, the pursuit of happiness, which went back long before the Declaration.
So I just don't understand why there's a problem with having a reference to property next to the pursuit of happiness to help define it for the children that we're teaching.
Well,
Because if
I think that's been lost.
If this is going to be a philosophical document, and this is what we are going to be teaching philosophically to the children that are in the care of the district, would we not then want to help them with that additional thought at the end to help define the pursuit of happiness?
But wouldn't that be one of the outcomes of a good civics program or government program? I mean, it seems to me that, since it is a civics or a government program, one of the things that you're going to focus on is the Constitution and all that, and the meaning and whatever, at least it used to be. And that would be delineated there.
We would hope. I can tell you that by the time my boys are juniors in high school, and my number 2 son is now a junior, I'm still correcting whether the pursuit of happiness means they have a right to be happy. So from my perspective as a modern parent, I think we should have something in there that points out what that pursuit of happiness actually means, because a lot is lost as the country is aged.
I think the idea too, if I remember correctly, was to kind of highlight the negative rights.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's what that list was intended to do.
what do you mean by negative rights?
The ones restricting the government.
Power shall make no law.
Right.
Power shall make no law.
Correct.
Versus all the, positive rights, which is so confusing for young kids that don't study any of this in depth. All the laws that have been placed on us to govern us that for our own protection, like straws, that kind of thing.
Okay. Well,
So anyway, that, if I remember correctly, that's why we had that there. It wasn't, this is quoting verbatim, or, it was just a highlight that these were the negative rights that were supposed to be afforded to each of us as citizens. And not an all-inclusive list, but.
okay, then another issue a concern that I have is come down to liberty. So you have a definition here of liberty, the freedom from restraint that allows you to exercise your God-given rights and so forth. And then you have a definition of freedom, which I do not see. It's almost like we're getting to, we're defining, instead of defining the words in the mission statement, we're now defining words in the definition of liberty. So then you look after that, and that's where it kind of really goes off the tracks for me, because these are definitions of a republic, of a democracy, socialism, Marxism, fascism, anarchy, and so forth. And I mean, I have a degree in political science, an undergraduate degree in political science, but if I had a doctorate, I would not sit here tonight and give you my definition of these terms. I just look at fascism, which is only about the means of production owned by a dictatorial state, and all aspects of daily life are regimented or controlled by central power. Well, that's after the state has become a fascist state. That doesn't mention the suppression of the media. It doesn't mention targeting marginalized populations. It doesn't mention the cult of the leader. I mean, that's not a comprehensive definition of fascism at all. And I don't even know why we would put any of these definitions in our mission statement. They really don't have anything to do with our mission statement. They're not have nothing to do with definitions. That was what the job was. So
So
definitely have a problem
this
with
part
that.
here, again, I had to watch the video again to follow it myself. So in the definition of responsible citizen, which is at the top of that page 2 of 3 there, then you have liberty, rights, and responsibilities. So the highlighted part down here was, if you get to this point, then you can click on liberty, rights, and responsibilities to
I
get
got
to this.
that. I've got that.
Okay.
But I don't see what socialism, Marxism, anarchy, I don't, those don't have anything to do with the definition of liberty. We're going off track, I think, and so
Well,
we,
can I ask you a very simple question on that?
please.
If you live in a socialist, Marxist, fascist, anarchist, tyranny, despotism, or an arbitrary society of any type, can you have liberty? By the way the Founding Fathers intended.
Well, that's a really good question, and one of the reasons I bring this up is if we're going to include this, then we need to include things like the term liberal democracy. That is our NATO allies, other countries, India, South Korea, that now have a parliamentary system. They have universal suffrage. They have liberties, but some of them are now moving towards the strong man. They're moving towards, we might be losing our liberal democracy, and I think we need to have, if we're going to do this, we need to put liberal democracy down here, because many people think the word liberal is liberal versus conservative, the two polarized sides in our country. But liberal democracy actually goes back to the Age of Enlightenment. The word liberal is a totally different meaning, and that was to curb the power of the monarch or of the king. And it was also to say that people were actually created equal. At that time, it was thought that the people, well, not even going back that far necessarily, because those were the aristocrats. Those were the king's men, his counselors. It wasn't the people. But by the time of
power.
Yes, right. It was the beginning. But by the Age of Enlightenment, before that, we thought that people were the mob. We thought they were vicious. That we thought they were ignorant. We thought, and with Enlightenment, people, the thinkers began to say, well, wait, all people are created equal. And from that point on, everything totally changed. And I look at this, for example, let's go back to socialism, redistribution of wealth by the state for the state. Well, that's a really interesting definition, because when the Democrats are elected and they're in office, they redistribute wealth for the poor and the middle class. But they tell us that it's also good for the state. And when the Republicans are in power, they redistribute wealth for the wealthy. And they tell us that's good for the state. So are they both socialism?
Yep.
Well then, okay. But they do it. And so we've got that, and we've got liberty. So I sure have my liberty. Nobody's taking my liberty away. These are just not good definitions. I mean, they don't do the job. And I don't see why they need to be included there. They're somebody's definition, but they're not comprehensive.
Well, they would be based on Diana's review of the tape. I would believe they would be our definitions that we came up with as a group.
I just don't see the point in including them in the mission statement.
These were proposed for consideration.
It's just too much.
If you would like to bring alternate definitions, we're happy to entertain them.
I don't want to bring alternate definitions. I want to stop it at freedom, or if you want to, at liberty, if you insist on then defining the word freedom as part of the definition of liberty, okay, let's stop with freedom.
Well, but
We'll just take out everything below that.
Well, wait a minute. We're constantly hearing about our democracy. And so I think part of the conversation, at least for me, was about making that clear distinction for those who don't want to get a master's degree or, whatever degree in political science to understand all the history, is to kind of clear up, you know, in simple terms about what all these labels that are being thrown out that our kids are listening to all the time, what they may mean. So
Well, see,
if you
I
don't.
think this belongs in a social studies
Okay.
purview.
I'd love
Social
it in
studies
history
people.
class.
Of what?
I'd love to have it in history class.
Well, I think this is where this belongs, is there, but I don't think this belongs in. And also, we're giving these definitions as if we're the end-all, be-all of the definitions, and I don't think we're just a public school board.
But it's our mission statement.
It doesn't
So
need
if you
to be.
disagree with, you know,
This
with
part doesn't
the
need to
definition
be.
of one of them, propose something else. But our whole mission statement is to, you know, we were talking about just defining what a responsible citizen means.
Yes, and I
Because
think-
what you think it means and what I think it means are two different things.
And I think these definitions are not comprehensive enough, and it would take
So-
too long to write them. The word liberty and the definition of liberty is all we need. And anyway, it's just too long. The whole thing's long enough. It doesn't need to be any longer. Liberty is, there's your definition. Mission accomplished.
Would you at least define republic?
A republic is representative government.
So having the distinction between a republic and a democracy in our society might be important, because we don't live in a democracy as much as we live in a representative republic.
Well, actually, we should call it a democratic republic, or some combination of the two words, because the important part is that the people get to vote on who their representatives are going to be. And those two ideas, I think, are very important to put together. Yes, we are a republic, but how do we get to our representatives? For example, right now, there's a movement on to go back in history and have our state legislatures select their senators. So that would not be.
That would intrigue me, by the way, because it was supposed to have, the states were supposed to have that level of voice in the government.
Yes, and
But
then,
that would intrigue me to go back there. But again, though, I mean, if we can't agree that we're going to define republic versus democracy, a very simple definition point versus what we're saying liberty, because that's how we derive where
that's
we
fine.
get to.
If it's absolutely necessary to define those two words, but then end up with the word democratic republic, because that's what our system is. It starts with people voting, and they vote, and they get their representatives. And those two things together, I happen to think, are very important.
So you're saying that we could have a republic with appointed people?
We've had it in the past. We have it when the state legislatures appointed their U.S. senators.
But
we had
weren't they electing a senator from the state legislature after they were in turn elected
By the people.
by the people?
Yes,
I don't know if it worked that way. I don't remember.
that's how it worked.
And so then they selected the.
They would elect out of a series of nominees their Senate representatives, their two senators.
Jamie, did it work that way?
Yeah.
That they would pick from their body?
Not their body, but from a
The
list of suggested people or.
The representatives, like we're CD4, so like GOSAR would, our representatives would select our two senators from our state.
What was the state legislatures?
Yes.
It was our state legislature.
Okay, so then it would be our
It was this-
legislative
it was the-
districts.
Correct.
Okay, so our legislative districts would then select our senators.
Yes.
And the purpose of that was so that our senators would never get too powerful and not care about what the people thought, which is exactly what has happened. So I agree, I would like to go back to the old way.
It would be intriguing, but neither here nor there. I mean, we've always had, at some level, an elected representative government in our republic, and I don't know that it's necessarily a genuine thing to add democracy, because I don't know that we've ever needed to define it, because we've never really appointed our representation.
And our
in the way
our
that
founders
it's not a-
specifically warned against referring to ourselves as a democracy, but yet that's what we hear all the time. So I think it's important to make the distinction.
It is, but it's also important for our students to understand that the way the system works is that we are a democratic republic until we change it. But we do vote for our representatives currently. That's the way it works. And for our president and for school board members and mayors, and that's how this system works. It starts with the people.
Right, which is what a republic is, representation.
So we are a democratic republic. That's what we are.
So now that we've discussed it, we're going to.
So this is up for the board's approval at the board meeting. And so at that point, then you would need to, if you wanted to have further discussion or move that certain things be revised.
I would really like to see, Kathy, if you have an issue with definitions, that you bring us alternate definitions to consider.
No, I won't. I told you what I will do. I'll find liberty and freedom. I'll go ahead. I'll vote for that. Republic and democracy, okay? And then
I would like, if you disagree with the definition on something, why wouldn't you bring an alternate definition?
because
I think what she disagrees with is the inclusion
Of
of
any.
every, no. She wonders why everything from socialism on down would be part of the statement, and that those things like that are either going to be taught like in U.S. history, free enterprise or economics class, or a civics class. I mean, these are areas that I covered when I was teaching civics and free enterprise.
And I don't disagree that was covered, but when we start talking to students today, and there's the research to back it up, there are actual studies that have been done, polls that have been done of people just post-high school. They seem to favor socialism as a form of government.
Well, the thing is that we've only put this down as redistribution of wealth by the state, for the state, and actually in those countries like Great Britain and France, those are democracies or
democratic socialism.
exactly. And so actually, when you start looking at it, if you look at it as only, you can see in our country, we have a democracy. That is where the people get to vote. And we have free enterprise. They're two separate things. And then when you start getting to these, like socialism, what you're doing is you have the political philosophy, but it can be like Great Britain or France or Germany or or an example would be Switzerland. I mean, the Swiss are what, they're not even a representative, they're a direct democracy. In other words, that's the purest form of democracy. But they also have socialism as an economic form. So you can have people in those countries like Great Britain, where our countries, a lot of our ideas come from, they believe in socialism. We don't. We believe in our political system, but we believe in free enterprise too. So that's where I think you get into those. I know what you're trying to do.
There's a value there to that, I think, long term. I really do, because I think when I hear a teacher say who's teaching civics in summer school that he doesn't have enough time to get it all in, I think we do our children a disservice when I hear things like that.
I think that's true of any. I mean, if you have a rigorous academic thing, it is hard to cover in 5 weeks that it takes 18 weeks to cover. So it's all condensed, even though you're going longer periods of time. But I agree with you.
But when we talk about that, it may be helpful to have some of this in the background of what defines that word liberty. Horse is dead?
Beat that to death.
Okay.
Okay.
Item 6.6, this is a request to add a extracurricular tax credit club for smoke trees, similar to the ones that we've seen already. Item 6.7, and this is our recommendation to approve our renewal with the ASBA Policy Services Agreement.
Do we get a discount because we sent them back a better policy than what they sent us?
No, we don't get that discount. What they do save us though is the hours of coming through all those statutes and fixing all of our policies.
Versus for $17,000 for, what is it, 3-year term? 4-year term? That's pretty cheap labor to do policy.
Item 6.8, this is an annual resolution to approve our borrowing request through Wells Fargo should we find that we have an issue with cash flow and need to make payroll. Item 6.9, this is an adjustment to our policy professional support staff bereavement leave. You may recall that we just had this policy approved by the board in July. What we discovered is that there was a discrepancy in the interpretation under the bereavement leave, so we have some clarifying language here. That the 5 days of bereavement comes from sick leave. Is not in addition to. Item 6.10, this is a recommendation to approve a contract for speech services with Ardor Health Solutions. We have been unable to fill one of our speech and language pathologist positions.
But we have been filling others.
And then item 6.11 is our vouchers for June, our vouchers for June are not available because we're closing out the books for July, and then our student funds through June.
I do have a question on the auxiliary funds. Why does Jamaica have so much money in its fund, but Oregon is so little?
And which
They
one?
do more fundraising.
Auxiliary funds, Jamaica versus Oregon Day.
More fundraising.
Well, I don't know, say we do probably similar fundraising, I just think as much as we can gather.
Yeah,
We both did the APEX, but they gathered up a lot more than we did, so I mean.
And Lackawanna for a while.
If you go to the detail report further back, then it'll show you the revenues and the expenditures for that. So you'll see that there's not a whole lot of detail as far as what is actually the source of revenue, but as mentioned, there's fundraisers that go on. The size of Jamaica versus Oregon is almost double. So there's some, the amount of carry forward from year to year can depend on the actual current balance as well. We are in the process of not only our Visions software system that we went live on in July, we also replaced our old Blue Bear system with a new system called InTouch. So that's also we're in the works of creating or running the new balance sheets. So these may change in the months ahead as we roll the new balances forward.
What's it called? InTouch?
InTouch is the new system.
Okay.
And then in our informational items, we do have an update from Educational Services and also from Personnel and Technology.
We are working on, I think it's on the 23rd, changing the superintendent's evaluation instrument. I'd be very interested in having you submit items because from your perspective as superintendent, I think it's very important that the instrument highlight things that whoever the superintendent is proficient at, wants to, you have a different perspective from ours because you are the superintendent and you sit there and you listen to us give you your evaluation, but you may feel that we didn't recognize things that we possibly could have, or just the opposite, maybe. I don't know, but that was a joke. So, yeah. But I don't want you to, work hard to do it. It's just keep thinking about it in your own mind and spending a lot of time towards it.
Any other updates from the board, announcements? Okay. We'll actually vote on this next week, which will be August 21st, right here, 6 p.m. Hope to see you there. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion we adjourn.
Second.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
Nicole Cullen,
Yes.
John Maston,
Yes,
Pat Brody.
Yes.
Thank you.
we are adjourned.
Thank you.